Hey guys, I'm Dave and welcome to the Trull Gallery. Today we're going to crank out some quick gifts, hopefully in time for the holidays. If you're like me, maybe you emerge from the shop to find a large tree or a menorah or a Festivus pole in your living room.
A Festivus for the rest of us!
Clearly, I need to crank out some gifts, and because I have a bunch of foodies in my life, I thought I would batch out a couple of different style spatulas and give those out. Now, if you're one of the people who may be getting these spatulas, pause the video and come back after the gift exchange. Everybody else, let's see if I can pull this off in time for the holidays. Since I plan on batching out the two spatulas, I made myself a couple of templates. I used some half-inch plywood, sketched out some pleasing shapes, and then cut them out with the bandsaw. Then I cleaned them up with a bit of sanding. I had some half-inch thick walnut kicking around, and I milled it into strips for the project. I used my templates to lay out the cut lines. Now, please don't have a heart attack because I'm using a Sharpie. The ink will be rounded or sanded off during the build, and I'm still in search of a good pencil to mark on walnut. But for now, my old eyes can see these lines just fine. I took my stock to the bandsaw and separated the blanks. Then I could come back and cut to my line. Staying close to the line will make the cleanup easier in the next step. Both the small and the large blanks were cut out this way. Now you could go straight from the bandsaw to the sander and skip the upcoming drama, but I do love my routers. So I set up my router table with a half-inch diameter flush trim bit and set the bearing height so it would ride against the template. This gets a bit sketchy, and I did have a couple of catches while cleaning up the blanks. And I've never gotten used to using hold-down paddles at the router table, so I'm very conscious of where my fingers are at all times. After a bit of trial and error, I realized that a climb cut was necessary on one side of the spatula to minimize the chance of a tear out. If I do these again and I plan ahead, I'll pick up a spiral bit for a cleaner cut. And maybe one with a bearing top and bottom so I can avoid those climb cuts. Then again, I can replace a lot of spatula blanks for $195. I left the far end of each spatula rough. I'll clean those up later at the sander. I just knew those would be a challenge at the router. There's still some cleanup to do, so I put a sanding drum in my drill press, added an auxiliary table with an opening for the drum, and raised the table so I could keep my cleanup nice and square. A few light passes cleaned up most of the work, but I spent a little extra time in those few spots where I got tear out. I also cleaned up the handle ends that I chose not to route. I took a few minutes to sand off the residue from the double stick tape and any remaining Sharpie with my random orbit sander and 150 grit paper. Back at the router table, I chucked up an 1/8" roundover bit and eased the edges of the spatulas. I started at one edge of the blade, went up and around the handle, and ended on the other edge, before turning them over and hitting the other side. I didn't worry about the tip of the spatula, that'll come in the next step. You'll be happy to know that there was no router excitement with this small bit, just nice clean roundovers. The blades on the spatulas are still too chunky for my liking, so it's back to the table saw. To start with, I put together another version of my tenoning jig. I honestly thought I had done a video on how to build these earlier, but I guess not. It's basically a tall fence secured to a piece of stock that rides on the top of the saw fence, and a third piece that holds them snugly to the fence. Another piece of stock is added for a fence, and a toggle clamp is added to secure the work in place. I played around in SketchUp to determine the blade angle and set my blade to 5 degrees. Angle adjustments are easy on cabinet saws, but it does take me a minute to do it on this portable saw. I made a test pass, but I wasn't thrilled with the angle. The blade of the spatula was still too chunky. So I adjusted the blade to 3 degrees and tried again. I started with a small blank, clamped it to the jig, ran the first face through the blade, I turned the blank around and made the second cut. And this time the angle looked much better, and we'll clean up the rest in a minute. I adjusted the fence on my jig and raised the blade just a bit for the larger spatulas, and then I ran them through just like the small ones. First one face, and then the other. Both sides of each spatula had a bit of a lip from the table saw, and some saw marks on the face. So I used my random orbit sander with 150 grit paper to smooth things out. I did this with both the small and the large spatulas. Now for a bit of hand sanding. I used 120 grit and 180 grit paper to remove any last bits of machine marks, imperfections, or tear-outs. I started by easing the edge of the spatula and blending them into the roundovers. Then I just smoothed out everything else. If the tip of the spatula seemed too fine, I sanded it a bit just to give it a little bit more meat. After wearing out my right hand and my left forearm, I called it a night. But I came back the next day and spent a little more time on the handle end of the spatulas to get them nice and clean. The last thing to do was to give them several coats of mineral oil for protection. I apply a liberal amount and let it soak in. After about 20 minutes, I come back and wipe off any excess and repeat that process once a day for 3 or 4 days. And with that, these spatulas are ready to go. This really was a quick and easy project, and everything should be dry in time to wrap it up for the holidays. And I know some of you will question that router technique, but that's okay. As I mentioned, there's a lot of different ways to clean up those blanks. And if you're watching this after the holidays, just know that foodies always love handmade gifts for the kitchen. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this video. Was this something I could have done differently, smarter, safer, quicker? Drop them in the comments below. I'd love to hear. And as usual, down in the description, I've got a list of tools and equipment that I use on a regular basis. And some of them have affiliate links, and those just kind of help support the channel. If you enjoyed this video, maybe give us a thumbs up and share it with friends. And if you haven't already, maybe it's time to hit that subscribe button and a little bell so you get notified each time I put out a new video. Not sure what's coming up next, but theoretically we could be going back to that big build that I've been working on. So until then, have a great day, stay safe, take care. See you soon.